I was 24 years old when I stepped into the most exclusive shooting range in Austin, Texas, a place where the walls were lined with gold plaques, and the parking lot held more sports cars than a showroom. I walked toward the entrance wearing an old olive green jacket and carrying my father's vintage M1 Garand rifle slung over my shoulder. To the others standing there, dressed in tactical gear worth more than my college tuition, I must have looked like a joke. The receptionist, a man with a designer haircut and a disdainful smirk, didn't even bother to hide his reaction. "SAIP lanes don't allow the lost and confused," he said loudly enough for a few nearby members to hear. A young man in a $1,000 tracksuit snickered behind me. "They letting in janitors now," he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. I said nothing. I simply pulled out the VIP pass I had carried for years, a pass gifted by one of my father's oldest comrades, a man who had seen my skill firsthand. I handed it to the receptionist without a word. The scanner beeped green. His smirk faltered, but he stepped aside, muttering under his breath, "This is a mistake." I kept walking, the laughter and whispers crashing behind me like a tidal wave. Phones were already out, live streams flickering to life, captions mocking me before I had even fired a single shot. But I didn't flinch. I had come here for a reason, not for them, not for their approval. I had a promise to keep. And I was about to remind them why real skill never needed permission to walk into any room. The moment I entered the lounge, I could feel the stares. It was a cathedral of wealth and privilege. Marble floors gleamed under soft golden lights. Leather armchairs lined the room, where members lounged casually, sipping artisan coffee and polishing their $1,000 rifles. My old jacket and worn boots might as well have been a crime scene. One woman in a crisp white shooting jacket leaned over to her friend, laughing behind a manicured hand. Another boy, no older than 20, lifted his phone, zooming in on my scuffed jeans and faded rifle with the kind of gleeful cruelty that only the truly sheltered could muster. "Is she lost?" someone said, loud enough for the room to hear. "No, she's the new cleaning staff," another chimed in, laughter bubbling up like a chorus. Their words cut, but I kept my eyes ahead. I had survived worse than whispers. At the far end of the lounge, a private livestream was playing on a giant digital board, showcasing the scores of elite members as they competed. Already, captions from personal livestreams were pouring in. "Dumpster diver at Hawthorne. Who let the janitor on the VIP lanes? That rifle's from a museum." My mother, watching from her hospital bed at home, was seeing it all. I could only imagine her face, seeing her daughter mocked by strangers who didn't know anything about where I came from, or why I was here. A cluster of members gathered, some laughing openly now. Among them, Ethan Drake, the golden boy of Hawthorne, stood tall, his tailored tactical vest hugging his athletic frame. His rifle, custom-made and polished to perfection, gleamed under the lights. He glanced at me, a lazy grin spreading across his face. "Careful, sweetheart," he called out, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I wouldn't want you to get dust on the marble." Laughter erupted again, louder this time. I paused for a brief moment, letting their noise wash over me like a cold river. I could have turned around. I could have walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I moved steadily forward, my father's rifle resting calmly on my shoulder, and my focus sharper than any insult they could throw. They didn't know me. And they sure as hell didn't know what I was capable of. I tightened my grip on the old M1 Garand as I approached the registration desk. Memories flooded in, grounding me in a way no amount of ridicule could shake. This rifle wasn't just a weapon, it was a legacy. My father, Colonel Thomas Morgan, had once been the best marksman in his division. His name was whispered with a mix of awe and fear across battlefields. Not because he sought glory, but because he never missed. He was a shadow stitched into the history of every conflict he touched. Growing up, our shooting range wasn't a polished marble gallery. It was the deep woods behind our house, where the air smelled of pine and the only applause came from the sharp crack of a bullet, finding its mark. He taught me everything: how to breathe with the rhythm of the earth, how to feel the heartbeat of the target, how to know when the shot was ready not by sight, but by instinct. He never once doubted me. Not when I was 7 years old and could outsuit grown men. Not when I insisted on repairing the M1 Garand with my own hands after it jammed one bitter winter. Not when I promised him at his bedside in the VA hospital that I would carry his lessons forward no matter where life took me. This was that moment. I wasn't here for the crowd or their acceptance. I was here because every shot I took was a silent conversation with the man who raised me. As I moved to the firing lanes, whispers continued to snake through the lounge. Why's she even here? Probably found that rifle at a garage sale. Someone call security. I ignored them. Instead, I slipped my fingers along the worn wood of the stock, feeling the grooves my father's hands had carved over decades. My heart beat steady, my breathing evened out. They wanted a show. What they were about to get was a lesson in silence, precision, and legacy. And I was ready to deliver it. I reached lane 8, feeling the weight of every stair burning into my back. The range marshal, a stern-looking man with a clipboard, approached. His crisp uniform and polished boots spoke of long service and an even longer sense of entitlement. "You sure you're in the right place?" he asked, voice carrying a note of barely hidden disdain. Before I could respond, Ethan Drake strolled over, flanked by a few of his friends. His confident smirk was a well-practiced weapon. "I'll make it interesting," Ethan said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "One match. You and me." The room buzzed with sudden excitement. Phones came up again, live streams flickering alive. "If you beat me," he continued, chuckling under his breath, "I'll pack up my gear and leave this range for good." He paused, letting the words settle. "But if I win," his eyes gleamed, "you walk out of here, and you don't come back." His friends burst into laughter, slapping each other's shoulders like they'd already won. The range marshal didn't intervene. He only raised an eyebrow, amused. I stared at Ethan for a long moment. He was everything this place celebrated: wealth, appearance, arrogance masquerading as confidence. They expected me to cower, to back down, to prove them right. Instead, I simply nodded once. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She's serious," someone muttered. Ethan grinned wider. "No pressure, sweetheart?" I moved to the shooting lane without a word, adjusting the old strap on my rifle. My fingers were steady, my mind sharper than it had ever been. The range technician confirmed the rules: 10 shots each scored on accuracy, highest total wins. Simple. Ethan swaggered up to his lane first. His rifle was a custom-built beauty, probably worth more than my entire net worth. He settled into his stance like he was born for it. He fired his first 3 rounds, each one met with cheers. The scores flashed on the screen: 10.0, 9.9, 10.0. The lounge erupted with applause. Ethan turned slightly, offering a mocking little bow toward me. I didn't react. Not yet. So instead, I slid a single round into the chamber of my Garand, feeling the familiar weight settle into place like an extension of my own soul. They wanted to humiliate me. They had no idea what they had just invited into their precious house of glass. The room fell into a heavy silence as I stepped up to the line. Somewhere behind me, I heard someone snicker. Phones were raised, ready to capture my humiliation, eager to broadcast it across every social feed like some modern-day public stoning. I exhaled slowly, letting the noise, the tension, the disdain all drain away. In my hands, the old Mem 1 Garand felt alive. I leveled the rifle, my hazel eyes locking onto the tiny red dot 50 meters downrange. The world narrowed to a pinprick. One breath, one heartbeat, one shot. I squeezed the trigger. Ping. The scoreboard chimed. 10.0. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone coughed, covering an awkward laugh. I loaded the next round, calm as morning fog. Second shot. Ping. 10.0. Now a few heads turned. The snickers grew quieter. Third shot. Ping. 10.0. Bro. A soft melody played from the range's speakers reserved only for perfect streaks. It echoed off the marble and glass like a hymn no one expected to hear. The lounge shifted, the air tightening. Fourth shot. Ping. 10.0. I heard a gasp, sharp, involuntary, from somewhere behind me. Fifth shot. Ping. 10.0. In the reflection on the glass divider, I caught a glimpse of Ethan's face. The smugness had cracked, replaced by a frown creeping across his polished features. 6th shot. Ping. 10.0. A headset clattered to the floor as one of Ethan's friends dropped it in shock. 7th shot. Ping. 10.0. Laughter had died. The only sounds were the crisp reports of my rifle and the insistent melody from the scoreboard, now playing like a victory march. 8th shot. Ping. 10.0. I adjusted my stance slightly, breathing steady, feeling the pulse of my legacy thrumming in my veins. 9th shot. Ping. 10.0. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. 1 shot left. 1 more. I loaded the final round, feeling the weight of it settle into the chamber like a promise. My father's voice whispered in my memory. Trust yourself. So I squeezed the trigger. Ping. 10.0. The scoreboard flashed bright and triumphant. 100.0. Perfect score. Facility record. The digital plaque appeared almost instantly. Claire Morgan, Hawthorne Elite Range record holder. For a moment there was only stunned silence. Then, slowly, from the back of the room, the range marshal who had barely concealed his contempt earlier began to clap. One sharp, deliberate clap after another, echoing across the stunned lounge. Others followed, awkward at first, then with growing energy, until the applause filled the hall like a storm breaking open. I lowered my rifle, letting it rest against my shoulder. My hazel eyes swept the crowd, locking onto Ethan Drake. His face was pale. His friends had backed away, leaving him standing alone. I took a step forward, my voice soft but steady. My father taught me to shoot when I was 6 years old, I said, my words slicing through the applause. While some of you were learning how to double-click a mouse, I was learning how to breathe with a trigger. The room froze. The livestream exploded, comments pouring in like a tidal wave. She's a legend. She silenced the whole place. Claire Morgan. I didn't need their approval. I had my father's pride stitched into every heartbeat. And now they would remember my name long after their mockery had faded into dust. The range director, General Marcus Reed, a tall man with silver hair and a chest full of old battle scars, made his way to the front of the lounge. He had been watching everything, the laughter, the jeers, the way they had turned my presence into a public spectacle. His expression was carved from stone, but his eyes carried something heavier, disappointment. He stepped up onto the platform where scores were displayed and spoke into the microphone, his voice resonant and commanding. Today, he said, pausing to let the weight of the silence settle, we witnessed a reminder. The crowd stood frozen, some still holding their phones limply at their sides. This range was built to honor skill, discipline, and excellence, not privilege, not arrogance, not mockery. He turned his gaze directly toward the group who had laughed the loudest. Some shifted uncomfortably, staring at the floor. It's effective immediately, he continued, his voice sharp. Those found mocking fellow members will face suspension pending review. Standards here are about ability, not status. Murmurs rippled through the room, faces turned pale. A few parents of the young trust fund heirs in the crowd looked ready to explode, but none dared speak. The general tapped a button, and a large screen behind him lit up. Claire Morgan, facility record holder 100/100. My name glowed under the brilliant lights, a permanent reminder etched into the heart of the Hawthorne Elite Range. I stood there, rifle at my side, feeling the tide shift. Those who had mocked me, the ones who tossed snide comments like stones, now looked away when I caught their eyes. Even Derek, the receptionist who had sneered at me when I first walked in, couldn't meet my gaze. His clipboard trembled slightly in his hands. Vanessa Sterling, the glamorous sharpshooter who had openly laughed at my jacket, began hastily packing her gear. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the straps of her expensive case. Tyler Reed, the cocky athlete who had called me maintenance, sat slumped in a corner, his $12,000 rifle untouched, ignored. And Ethan Drake, once the crown prince of the lounge, stood there silent, his bravado stripped bare. His gaze followed me like a man realizing too late that the ground had shifted beneath his feet. The truth was clear now, undeniable. Skill had nothing to do with appearances. Strength wasn't loud. It wasn't bought. It was earned, one steady breath, one perfect shot at a time. The crowd had scattered into small, uncomfortable clusters, whispering behind cupped hands. For the first time since I walked into that building, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the outsider to be laughed at. I was the benchmark they would now measure themselves against. I turned to leave the range, feeling the weight of a dozen eyes on my back. The Garin rested easy on my shoulder, and with every step, I could feel my father's presence, proud, steady, walking with me. Just as I reached the exit, I heard a voice behind me. "Claire." I turned. Ethan Drake stood there, his polished gear now looking almost ridiculous against the vulnerability etched across his face. His earlier swagger had melted into something raw, something almost human. He hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair, his usual confidence gone. I was wrong. The words came out stiff, almost painful. His eyes found mine, no games, no arrogance, just a man stripped bare. "You didn't just beat me, you destroyed every illusion I had about this place and about myself." The lounge had gone quiet again, their attention snapping back to us like moths to a flame. I said nothing. I simply waited. "I don't deserve your time," he added, voice low. "But if you'd let me, I'd like to buy you a coffee. Maybe hear more about the man who taught you to shoot like that." For a moment, I simply studied him. Not because I needed validation, not anymore, but because sometimes the most profound victories are the ones that don't demand humiliation in return. A small, genuine smile pulled at my lips. "Coffee's a start," I said quietly. Relief flickered across Ethan's face, real and almost boyish. As I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, he fell into stride beside me, careful to keep pace without presuming. The range door swung shut behind us, sealing off the mockery, the cruelty, the old assumptions that had ruled that space for too long. Ahead of me, the world stretched wide open. Not because someone had handed it to me, but because I had earned it one breath, one shot, one unshakable moment of truth at a time. Some victories are not loud. They do not come wrapped in flashing lights or shouted from rooftops. They do not seek to humiliate, to crush, or to parade. The greatest victories are quiet. They happen in the steady breath before a shot, in the calm refusal to break under pressure, in the unshakable belief that your worth is not dictated by what others see but by what you know you carry inside. That day at the Hawthorne L8 range, it was not just my rifle that spoke. It was every early morning spent training in the woods behind my childhood home. Every memory of my father's patient voice guiding me through frustration and fear. Every promise I had made to honor where I came from, and to walk into any room without shrinking. Maybe you have been there too. Maybe you've been underestimated, laughed at, told you did not belong. If you have, remember this. Real strength needs no permission. Real excellence needs no applause. And sometimes the most powerful way to answer the world's doubt is simply to rise and let your actions speak louder than any insult ever could. If Claire's story resonated with you, if you've ever faced a room full of judgment and chose to stand anyway, leave a comment below. Share your story. Like and share this video so others can remember. You don't need to look the part to be the real thing. You already are.